The 1980s were the golden age of horror, a decade that turned monsters into icons, nightmares into franchises, and the video store into a second home for fans of the genre. Tonight, we're counting down the top 10 horror movies of the 1980s. The ones that shaped the genre, defined the decade, and left their mark on generations of fans. Let us know in the comments which of these you agree with, what we missed, and which 80s classic still gives you chills. Number 10. Re-Animator, 1985. Stuart Gordon's Re-Animator is a wild fusion of splatter horror and pitch-black comedy, loosely adapted from H.P. Lovecraft's Herbert West Re-Animator. It tells the story of Herbert West, a brilliant but unhinged medical student who develops a glowing green serum capable of bringing the dead back to life. What begins as scientific ambition quickly spirals into chaos, gore, and madness. Jeffrey Combs steals the film as West, playing him with manic intensity and deadpan arrogance. His obsession with conquering death turns him into both the film's hero and its villain, a man as dangerous as the creatures he creates. Bruce Abbott provides the straight man as Dan Kane, the fellow student reluctantly drawn into West's experiments, while Barbara Crampton adds both humanity and vulnerability as Dan's girlfriend, Megan. What makes Re-Animator unforgettable is its audacity. The film doesn't just push boundaries, it smashes through them with gallons of blood and outrageous set pieces. From severed heads with a mind of their own to morgue corpses exploding into grotesque violence, Gordon leans into practical effects that are both shocking and darkly hilarious. Composer Richard Band's tongue-in-cheek score, riffing on Bernard Herrmann's Psycho theme, sets the perfect tone for the madness. Beneath the over-the-top gore lies a clever streak of satire. Re-Animator pokes fun at the arrogance of science, the institutions that enable it, and the fragile line between genius and insanity. It's messy, outrageous, and utterly fearless, a midnight movie classic that embodies the wild, anything-goes energy of 1980s horror. Number 9. Possession, 1981. Andrzej Żuławski's Possession is one of the most disturbing and uncompromising films of the 1980s, a work that blurs the line between psychological drama and supernatural horror. Set in divided Berlin, it tells the story of a marriage disintegrating in the most nightmarish way imaginable. What begins as a tale of jealousy and betrayal spirals into madness, violence, and something far darker lurking beneath the surface. Sam Neill plays Mark, a spy whose life unravels when his wife Anna demands a divorce. Isabelle Adjani's performance as Anna is nothing short of extraordinary, raw, unhinged, and terrifying. Her infamous subway scene, where she convulses in a violent breakdown that feels almost inhuman, is one of the most shocking sequences ever put on film, and it remains one of the most fearless performances in horror history. What makes Possession unique is its refusal to be categorized. On one hand, it's a searing portrait of a toxic relationship. The paranoia, the obsession, the self-destruction. On the other, it's a surreal descent into body horror, complete with grotesque creature effects designed by Carlo Rambaldi, the artist behind Alien Xenomorph. The other lover that emerges in Anna's life is something out of a fever dream, fusing sexuality and monstrosity in ways that still disturb audiences today. Żuławski directs with a feverish intensity, using long takes, off-kilter camera movements, and Berlin's bleak landscape to create a sense of constant unease. The film feels unstable, like it might collapse at any moment under the weight of its own madness, which is exactly what makes it so effective. Possession is not an easy film to watch, nor was it meant to be. It's harrowing, surreal, and unforgettable, a horror film that digs into the darkest corners of human emotion and refuses to let go. Number 8. Friday the 13th, 1980. Sean S. Cunningham's Friday the 13th is the film that took the slasher blueprint laid down by Halloween and turned it into a formula that would dominate horror for the next decade. Set at the cursed Camp Crystal Lake, it tells the story of a group of counselors reopening the camp despite its dark past, only to find themselves hunted one by a mysterious killer. The film's charm lies in its simplicity. The characters are young, carefree, and often distracted, which makes their isolation in the woods all the more terrifying. Betsy Palmer delivers a shocking performance as Mrs. Voorhees, whose late arrival in the story provides one of horror's great twists, while Adrienne King's Alice emerges as the film's survivor, resourceful enough to face the horror head-on. What Friday the 13th is best remembered for are its kills. Tom Savini's practical effects were groundbreaking at the time, bringing a grisly realism to each death. From arrows and axes to throats slit and bodies impaled, the film turned murder into spectacle, cementing the slasher's reputation for creative carnage. Though critics were harsh, audiences couldn't get enough. And the film's runaway success spawned one of the most enduring franchises in horror history. The name Jason Voorhees would become iconic in later installments, but this original film set the stage, transforming summer camp innocence into a place of paranoia, shadows, and blood. Friday the 13th may not have the polish of Carpenter's Halloween, but its relentless pace, shocking gore, and campfire legend atmosphere gave it staying power. It turned a quiet lakeside retreat into the birthplace of a horror empire. Number 7. Hellraiser, 1987. Clive Barker's Hellraiser is a descent into a world where pain and pleasure blur into something unrecognizable, a gothic nightmare that introduced one of horror's most iconic creations. Adapted from Barker's novella, The Hellbound Heart, it's a story about forbidden desire, betrayal, and the horrors that come from opening doors best left closed. The film begins with Frank Cotton, a man consumed by lust and obsession, who unlocks the puzzle box known as the Lament configuration. In doing so, he summons the Cenobites, extra-dimensional beings who exist to explore the extremes of sensation through torture. Frank is torn apart, but when his brother's family moves into the house where he died, he manages to return in a grotesque, half-resurrected form, needing blood to regain his body. Claire Higgins gives a chilling performance as Julia, Frank's former lover, who lures men to their deaths in order to help him regenerate. Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty becomes the unlikely heroine, discovering the truth about the Cenobites and their horrifying bargains. And then, of course, there's Doug Bradley as Pinhead, calm, regal, and terrifying, a figure who would go on to become a legend of 1980s horror. Hellraiser's strength lies in its willingness to embrace the grotesque. From the skinless resurrection scene to the hooks and chains of the Cenobites' world, Barker's imagination is brought to life with practical effects that remain shocking to this day. Yet beneath the gore lies a story about temptation and consequence, about people so consumed by desire that they willingly unleash hell upon themselves. With its mix of surreal horror, erotic undertones, and unforgettable visuals, Hellraiser carved out a place unlike anything else in the genre. It's not just about monsters. It's about the terrifying cost of chasing pleasures beyond human limits. Number 6. The Fly, 1986. David Cronenberg's The Fly is one of the most heartbreaking horror films of the 1980s, a tragic love story wrapped in grotesque body horror. A loose remake of the 1958 classic, Cronenberg's version strips away camp and leans into raw emotion, showing how science, obsession, and disease can transform both body and soul. Jeff Goldblum delivers a career-defining performance as Seth Brundle, a brilliant but eccentric scientist who invents teleportation pods. After a drunken experiment goes wrong, his DNA fuses with that of a housefly. At first, Brundle seems invigorated, stronger and more confident, but soon his transformation takes a horrific turn. Goldblum plays the descent with heartbreaking nuance, equal parts manic genius, vulnerable man, and doomed creature. Gina Davis is equally compelling as Veronica, the journalist who falls in love with Brundle and becomes his emotional anchor. Her horror at watching him deteriorate is matched only by her devotion, which gives the film its tragic core. Their relationship makes the film more than a monster story. It's a meditation on love and loss in the face of inevitable decay. Cronenberg's practical effects are legendary here. Each stage of Brundle's transformation is meticulously crafted, from fingernails falling away to oozing sores, until he becomes the monstrous Brundle fly. The film's climactic moments are both horrifying and deeply sad, embodying Cronenberg's trademark blend of science fiction and body horror with a rare emotional weight. The Fly resonates because it works on multiple levels, as a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition, as a metaphor for disease and mortality, and as a devastating story of love tested by the unthinkable. It's as much a tragedy as it is a horror film, leaving audiences disturbed not just by the gore, but by the humanity at its core. Number 5. Poltergeist, 1982. Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist, produced and co-written by Steven Spielberg, takes the familiar setting of suburban America and transforms it into a stage for supernatural terror. At first glance, the Freeling family's home in a new California development seems ordinary, even idyllic. But when strange occurrences begin, objects moving on their own, voices from the television, their safe domestic world slowly unravels into chaos. Craig T. Nelson and JoBeth Williams ground the story as Steve and Diane Freeling, loving parents whose disbelief turns to desperation as the haunting escalates. Heather O'Rourke is unforgettable as young Carol Ann, the innocent child who becomes the focal point of the entity's attention. Her eerie line, "They're here," forever etched into horror history. Zelda Rubinstein, as the psychic Tangina, provides both comic relief and spiritual gravitas, her presence adding to the film's otherworldly atmosphere. Poltergeist is as much about spectacle as it is about scares. The special effects, from ghostly apparitions to the nightmarish sequence of a man tearing at his own face, push boundaries at the time, blending practical and visual trickery with remarkable effectiveness. Yet beneath the set pieces lies an unsettling commentary. The house itself is built on disturbed ground, a reminder of greed and neglect buried beneath the polished facade of suburbia. The film succeeds because it balances genuine warmth with escalating terror. The Freeling family feels real, their love for one another making the supernatural assault all the more frightening. Unlike many horror films, this isn't about strangers or doomed victims. It's about a family fighting to hold on to each other in the face of forces they cannot comprehend. Poltergeist remains one of the defining haunted house films of the era, a blend of blockbuster spectacle and chilling horror that made suburban living rooms feel unsafe for an entire generation. Number 4. A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street brought terror to a place no one could escape. Dreams. The film introduces Freddy Krueger, a burned, knife-gloved killer who stalks teenagers in their sleep, turning their nightmares into brutal reality. By fusing supernatural horror with slasher conventions, Craven created one of the most original and enduring villains in the genre. Heather Langenkamp stars as Nancy Thompson, a teenager who realizes she and her friends are being targeted by Freddy. Unlike many horror heroines of the time, Nancy is resourceful and determined, using intelligence and grit to fight back. Robert Englund's performance as Freddy is menacing and unforgettable. Not yet the wisecracking trickster of later sequels, but a shadowy, monstrous figure whose very presence is unsettling. The film thrives on its surreal, dreamlike imagery. Bodies dragged across ceilings, a bed spewing a geyser of blood, hallways stretching into infinity. Each nightmare feels both imaginative and terrifying, capturing the logic of dreams where nothing is stable and death feels inevitable. Craven blurs the line between waking life and dreams so effectively that the audience, like the characters, never feels safe. Beneath the supernatural scares lies a layer of suburban guilt and denial. The parents of Elm Street harbor dark secrets about Freddy's past, and their silence comes back to haunt their children in the most literal way possible. It's a story about sins passed down, about how ignoring evil doesn't erase it. It only gives it more power. With its inventive visuals, iconic villain, and clever blending of reality and nightmare, A Nightmare on Elm Street stands as one of the most imaginative horror films of the 1980s. It transformed sleep itself into something to fear, ensuring Freddy Krueger would carve his way into horror legend. Number 3. The Evil Dead, 1981. Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead is raw, relentless horror, a film that took a tiny budget, a cabin in the woods, and sheer creativity, and turned them into one of the most influential cult classics of all time. What starts as a simple story, the five friends spending a weekend in a remote cabin, quickly escalates into a nightmare of demonic possession and blood-soaked chaos. Bruce Campbell, in his breakout role as Ash Williams, begins as an ordinary guy caught in extraordinary circumstances. Over the course of the film, his transformation from bewildered survivor to reluctant hero lays the groundwork for one of horror's most beloved icons. The rest of the cast, largely unknown at the time, bring a raw authenticity to their roles, their panic and terror heightened by Raimi's unflinching direction. The film's power lies in its inventiveness. With limited resources, Raimi used innovative camera techniques, from rapid low-angle tracking shots racing through the woods to extreme close-ups that distort reality, creating a visual style that felt both frantic and immersive. The practical effects are gloriously over the top. Melting flesh, gushing blood, and grotesque transformations that remain disturbing decades later. Unlike many horror films of the era, The Evil Dead doesn't provide much relief. Once the Necronomicon awakens the dead, the onslaught is constant, turning the cabin into a pressure cooker of violence and paranoia. The relentless pace, combined with Joseph LaDuca's eerie score, makes the film feel like an assault on the senses. Exactly the kind of raw intensity that would help it earn its infamous video nasty reputation overseas. What sets The Evil Dead apart is its mix of brutality and creativity. It proved that passion and imagination could outweigh budget limitations, inspiring countless independent filmmakers. More than just a splatterfest, it's a testament to what horror can achieve when filmmakers refuse to hold back. Number 2. The Thing, 1982. John Carpenter's The Thing is a masterclass in paranoia, atmosphere, and body horror. Set in the icy isolation of an Antarctic research station, the film follows a group of scientists who discover that a shape-shifting alien has infiltrated their base. Able to perfectly imitate any living organism, the creature turns friends into threats and trust into a deadly gamble. Kurt Russell anchors the story as R.J. McReady, a helicopter pilot forced into reluctant leadership as suspicion tears the group apart. The supporting cast, including Wilford Brimley, Keith David, and Donald Moffat, bring rugged authenticity, each man slowly unraveling under the psychological pressure of not knowing who to trust. What truly makes The Thing legendary are Rob Bottin's groundbreaking special effects. From the infamous chest chomp to the grotesque spider head, the transformations are a nightmarish showcase of imagination and craft. Even today, the practical effects remain jaw-dropping, a disturbing blend of viscera, surrealism, and uncanny realism that CGI still struggles to replicate. Carpenter amplifies the terror with slow, suffocating tension. Long stretches of silence, broken by bursts of shocking violence, keep the audience on edge. Ennio Morricone's score, with its minimalist, pulsing heartbeat motif, underscores the mounting dread. The Antarctic setting itself is a character, vast, empty, and merciless, ensuring there's no escape from the monster or from each other. More than just a creature feature, The Thing is a study of fear and mistrust. The true horror isn't just the alien lurking in the dark, but the suspicion that anyone, even your closest ally, could already be infected. Its bleak, ambiguous ending leaves viewers unsettled, cementing its status as one of the most chilling and uncompromising films of the decade. Number 1. The Shining, 1980. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is one of the most iconic horror films ever made. A haunting blend of psychological terror, surreal imagery, and meticulous craftsmanship. Adapted loosely from Stephen King's novel, it tells the story of Jack Torrance, an aspiring writer who takes a winter caretaking job at the remote Overlook Hotel with his wife Wendy and young son Danny. As the snow closes in, the isolation and supernatural forces of the hotel push Jack into a violent descent into madness. Jack Nicholson delivers a performance for the ages, balancing charm, menace, and full-blown insanity. His gradual unraveling, from frustrated father to axe-wielding madman, is both terrifying and darkly mesmerizing. Shelley Duvall, as Wendy, gives an equally powerful performance, her nervous energy and fragility grounding the film in emotional reality. And Danny Lloyd, as Danny, captures the vulnerability of a child burdened with the psychic ability known as the Shining, which makes him a target for the hotel's malevolent forces. Kubrick's direction is meticulous. Every frame feels deliberate, from the vast tracking shots through the hotel's empty corridors to the unsettling symmetry of its rooms. The overlook itself becomes a character, alive with whispers, visions, and ghostly inhabitants who blur the line between past and present. The chilling score, with its discordant strings and booming tones, adds to the oppressive atmosphere, making the hotel feel like a trap, closing in on its occupants. What makes The Shining endure is its ambiguity. Is Jack driven mad by supernatural forces, or is the isolation enough to unearth his demons? Kubrick refuses to provide easy answers, letting the horror seep into the spaces between what's shown and what's left unsaid. The imagery, the river of blood from the elevator, the ghostly twins in the hallway. Here's Johnny, has become part of cultural memory, endlessly referenced and imitated. At once grand and intimate, The Shining is a meditation on madness, family, and the destructive power of obsession. More than 4 decades later, it remains as chilling and hypnotic as ever, a film that redefined what horror could be and still casts its shadow across the genre. Those were 10 of the most essential horror films of the 1980s, a decade that turned the genre into a cultural force and made horror part of everyday pop culture. From masked killers and haunted suburbs to demons, gore, and science gone wrong, the 80s proved that fear could be flashy, imaginative, and unforgettable. Of course, there are plenty of great films from this era that didn't make our list, like Creepshow, 1982, the perfect horror anthology from George A. Romero and Stephen King; Near Dark, 1987, a stylish vampire western hybrid; and Pet Sematary, 1989, Stephen King's bleak, haunting story of love and loss. If you enjoyed this countdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment letting us know which 80s horror classics you'd include on your own list. Your feedback helps the channel grow, and we love hearing what every horror fan considers essential. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.